Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Skull Session Recruiting Podcast, brought to you by BuckeyeHuddle.com. I'm Mark Givler. I've got Kevin Noon with me here again today. We are going to dive into the land of five-star prospects today. The Buckeyes have had several on campus here in the last week, and they're also making some moves for another one that we're going to discuss as well. So we're going to have updates on five-star prospects today and see if the Buckeyes are either leading or trailing or trending or, whatever. We'll categorize them all in some way, shape, or form. Kevin, let's get right into it. Let's start with the five-star offensive tackle, David Sanders, number one offensive tackle in the country, maybe the number one player in the country in 2025. David was back on campus over the weekend. I have had the field very, very heavily bet the field here against Ohio State over the past year. I've had him going to Clemson. I'll kind of hold off on my thoughts on this for now and let you kind of give your take. Are the Buckeyes leading? Are they trending? Are they fading? Kind of how do you see them right now with David Sanders?
I was very much in line with where you were earlier in the process with there is a legitimate interest in Ohio State, but it's going to be hard to get him out of the region. I think for the sake of arguments of are they trending? I think yes. So I think Ohio State did a really strong job during the weekend visit. I think that they certainly made sure to give Sanders plenty of things to think about. Much like the Mason Short recruitment, though, Ohio State has not suddenly moved further south. And I think that's going to be problematic. David Sanders could go anywhere in the nation he wants to for school. I think that family and staying close to home and all of that is going to be very important for him. So I will say Ohio State is trending, but that is still one very much that I think that the field leads. And I'm not saying it's going to be impossible. Things certainly change, especially here in this world of new recruiting and how everything is. But, when it comes to Sanders, I'm just not feeling that one yet.
Yeah, my pick is still Clemson for Sanders. And I think that's going to be a tough one to pull away from Clemson. I think Georgia's probably running second right now. I think they did as good of a job as they could have this past weekend. They had him around a lot of their key recruits. They clearly can show him a path to the field really right away. I mean, the comparison with David Sanders is Paris Johnson, which I think is a really good comparison, both physically and just the way they kind of carry themselves. But even Paris was kind of walking into a situation where we knew he wasn't going to start as a freshman. I don't know that David isn't walking into a situation where he could start as a freshman. So I think there's some appeal there. There's some appeal from a cultural standpoint. I think he fits in with a lot of the guys already on campus and in that class. As I mentioned before, even when I've been picking Clemson, I feel like I've been critical of Ohio State's offensive line recruiting in the past, and there's been certain situations similar to these where I've kind of criticized how they've handled it or kind of, how they've botched it or not done what they needed to do or anything like that. I don't think that's happening here at all. I don't think if he goes to Clemson, Ohio State has botched this by any stretch. I think the fact that they're even on his list shows that they've done a great job since they are kind of a geographical outlier for him. But I can't go against Clemson right now. I think they've got too much momentum. That being said, when he put out his top six, I would have put Ohio State like fifth out of six on that list, like maybe ahead of South Carolina. I would go a little more aggressive with that. I could make the case they're third or fourth now. I think Nick Saban leaving Alabama is helpful for Ohio State as they try and climb the list here, try and climb the ladder. Tuscaloosa to Charlotte is no different than Columbus to Charlotte in theory. In some veins, it's kind of more of a pain because you can get a direct flight from Charlotte to Columbus for a decent price for, you're up and down in like an hour. So I think that's probably not where geography's hurting Ohio State. So I could argue them like third, but I don't think they're ahead of Clemson and Georgia still. And I don't know that they're going to be able to overtake Clemson, but we'll see. They are in it now. They feel they're more in it now than they did, a few months ago. So now it becomes, I guess here's my question, because I kind of was asked this on the board and kind of went down this road. Is this a blessing or a curse that they had a great visit on Saturday? Because on one hand, if you come out of last weekend and you're like, oh boy, we're way behind now, like we're still way behind, you can kind of cut ties and move on. Now you're like pot committed. Like you did so well on Saturday, you have to keep going. And now it's like, does it sting even more in 6 months if he commits to Clemson? I mean, how do you look at that?
It is a curse if I don't necessarily want to use the term fool's gold, but I'm going to, because if they buy into the fool's gold that, hey, we're right there, which we can argue. I agree third, was probably where they sit right now. But if they use all of their resources to try and stay or climb in that one, do you miss out putting these limited resources in other kids? And then when David Sanders does in fact commit to Clemson or to UGA, and then you're left scrambling at a position where your hit rate has not been where it needs to be, is problematic. So I think Ohio State has to approach this with we're in this, we're going to continue chasing this, but we have to have a different set of plans as well for what things look like if David Sanders says no, which I think you and I both think is probably the likely outcome.
I think here's how they have to play it. If let's say the number's 4, I even said on the board, could they get away with 3 in this class? Yeah, if you go nuts in 26 and take 6 in 26, and if you go after this coming season, if you go to the portal for like a starting caliber, stopgap for a year or two, I do think you could get away with 3 high school guys in this class. But if the number's 4, which I tend to think it is, I don't think you can count David Sanders in that, unless for some reason you could get him in June, because he's going to make an official. He's got, that's happening. So unless you come out of that official visit and he's like in and not like publicly in, not like, oh yeah, I'm coming, just, I'm going to take some visits. If he's in, because I don't think he's the type of kid who's going to commit somewhere and then do the circus stuff. It's not in his DNA, I don't think. I think when he commits somewhere, he's going to be solid. Yeah, unless you come out of the month of June with him already in the class, if this is going to be something that trickles into the fall, you can't count him in the numbers. You got to make sure you get 4 offensive linemen, and then David's your 5th. That's the way I think they have to handle it, or else they're going to risk coming up short on their number, which they're already, I think, going to be hard pressed to get to, because there's just not a lot of guys out there right now that you're like, yeah, they're at the top of the list for this guy. I mean, yeah, they can get Nolan Davenport in State, who I really like, but they haven't offered him yet. I think they can get Avery Gatch. I know I know people have kind of been saying he's going to Michigan for sure. I don't know. I think they've got a shot there. He's very tight with Carter Lowe. We still don't know what's going to happen with Michigan, with the NCAA over the next year. I think there's an opening there, but again, this isn't a position where we're talking about, like we talked about defensive backs recently, where it's like, oh gosh, they've got 10 or 11 guys that they're like in the lead for right now. It's not like that with offensive line. So they can't, I just don't think you can ever count David in the numbers, but we'll see how they handle it. But it is going to be an interesting dilemma now. It's going to be an interesting dynamic now, because they do think they're in the mix. And, the same people who told me they had no chance, 3 or 4 months ago are saying, I think we're in it now. So we will see. Moving on to another 5-star prospect who was on campus on Saturday, modern day running back Jordan Davidson. We had a very interesting debate on Jordan last week talking about in or out. I felt really horrible for kind of like, oh, I gotta be out until we see how the visit goes, make sure he shows up and see how the visit goes, because I've kind of been driving the Jordan Davidson is going to end up at Ohio State van all the way basically since June. And, obviously the Tony Alford thing threw a very big wrench into all that when Jordan rearranged his Ohio State plans. Wasn't sure if he was going to visit Ohio State, then kind of tacked him on at the end of a Michigan visit that he made. And, they didn't have a running backs coach, although I think Jordan kind of got a heads up on his visit who it was going to be. But, a lot's happened there in the last 3 weeks. It's been a roller coaster. Kevin, you had Jordan still in kind of pending. We both kind of said pending visits, pending this upcoming visit, what would happen. We had our stances, but you had Jordan still in. Do you still have Jordan in?
I do. And I know that some of those predictor metrics out there may not have Ohio State leading, may have Texas leading, but I don't buy into algorithms or things to drive subscriptions, except for subscriptions to Buckeye Huddle, of course. But I think that the fact that he made the visit, the fact that Carlos Loughlin is the Ohio State running backs coach, the fact that there was already an existing relationship, it really sounds like from quotes that have come out of Davidson's camp that may be the running backs coach that he's the closest with. I do think that people will look at Loughlin going out and offering a couple of other backs as is Ohio State not as sure about Jordan Davidson or Bo Jackson or Marquise Davis. I think it's a case of, you have your guys that you were recruiting at your previous school. And if they're up to snuff, you're going to continue recruiting them at your new school. But I don't think any of that has anything to do with Jordan Davidson. I would say that as of the time we are recording this, and that is, you have to say that when you're talking about recruiting, because stuff changes by the minute, it seems. But I am more confident now than I was on the last show where I made the proclamation, where I was far enough above 50% that I was like, well, yeah, I'll do this. I'm never going to be a 50-50 guy. That's not how I want to operate. I feel stronger now. Now, am I willing to put, 2 months salary on it? No, but I will say that I feel pretty strongly about Ohio State's chances.
I'm back in. Was out for a couple days. I'm back in. Got me back in. Visit went perfectly. Carlos Loughlin was one of the probably two best hires they could have made. If the goal was simply to keep Jordan Davidson right there at the top for you, this was probably the two best hires they could have made. Oregon's the only West Coast school he was considering. He wants to get away from California. He made that very clear to me. And early in the process, and his top schools list have shown that. So clearly he has a great relationship with Loughlin, or Oregon wouldn't be the only West Coast school on his list. So you're not fighting geography. You've now got a running backs coach again that does have a great relationship with Jordan. The visit went very well. You got, again, same thing with Sanders. You got him around some very important guys in this recruiting class. Carter Lowe, Tavian St. Clair, guys like that. And I think they have turned this back into their favor. I would put them back in the lead right now. The question is, when is he going to decide? And I think you kind of talked through like some of the new offers. I think that's the big thing is like, look, they need 2 running backs in this class. I think they should try and take 3. I don't know if they will try to take 3 or not. I just think they should try to take 3, but they need at least 2. And until they have 1, why would you zoom in? Why would you condense your search? So I think these new offers are, hey, these are guys I have good relationships with. If we don't get Jordan Davidson, these are some angles we can take. These are some guys we can approach, or we'll already have the offer out. We can kind of seamlessly transition to, I don't think Marquise Davis is going to end up at Ohio State, but I never have. So that's not new information for me. Do I know exactly where he's going to end up? Probably not. I think Michigan leads. I think Penn State's running second. I think it'll be one of those two schools, and I'm fairly confident in that. But I've never had him in the Ohio State class. My running back class for Ohio State has always been Bo Jackson and Jordan Davison. I still think they're going to get Bo Jackson. I'm highly confident they're going to get Bo Jackson. And I think for now, I think they're the team to beat again for Davidson. So we will see how that plays out. Now we get into receiver territory. Jamie French is kind of a regular point of discussion on our message board and on this program, but back on campus Saturday again. Kevin, you and I think both had him in last week, right? I know I did. You did too, I think. How are we feeling on Jamie French, especially after kind of an interesting wide receiver commitment over the weekend with Des Jones, which we talked about in a previous episode?
Right. Well, and the good thing is that Jamie French and Des Jones aren't, they're not going to be asked necessarily to really play the same position. So one has nothing to do with the other. You always do want to kind of see the cause and effect of, what a commitment or a decommitment or whatever means to the rest of the board. But with that being said, I like where Ohio State sits as I'm trying to talk over the dog.
Your dog doesn't like where he's sitting right now, apparently.
No, I don't. Apparently, but once we're done with the show, I'll deal with that. I think that Ohio State still sits in as good of a position as it had before. I know that more and more national type of people are starting to come on board with Ohio State's chances there. Be it the way that Ohio State is recruited in Florida, be it, with what it's been able to do with South Florida Express, all of that is meaningful. But I think that Ohio State did nothing to hurt its chances there with Jamie French.
And I would agree with that. I've had Jamie in really since he opened it up when Saban retired. And even before that, I kind of said, look, this isn't over. Like he's still talking to them. We wrote a story on Jamie, like a week or two before Saban retired. We didn't know Saban was retiring at the time, but Jamie had lots of good things still to say about Ohio State. Brian Hartline, he was going to keep visiting. So there's always been reason for optimism here. But I always have to caveat that with look, this isn't going to be over until December. I don't care what he does in the meantime. I don't care if he commits to Ohio State tomorrow. I don't care if he commits to Tennessee next week. This is not going to be over until December. It's just too competitive of a battle for a Florida kid who's got, like I said, every option in the country just about. So right now, I still have Ohio State as the favorite. I'm fairly confident in that. I think right now, Florida State is probably the team I'd be most nervous about if I was Ohio State. I think Tennessee has definitely made an impression, and we'll see how Tennessee does this year. They've kind of had a bit of a lull last year. They're coming off the year before that. I think we're going to find out a lot about the direction of that program because it's kind of been up and down. I think this year's going to tell us a little more about the direction of that program, but they've obviously made an impression on Jamie. I think Miami's probably running fourth, but we'll see. He's a North Florida kid. He's not a Dade County kid or anything like that. He's up in Jacksonville. So that's why I think Florida State right across the panhandle there is probably just their recent history, their recent success. They've had, Norvell's got that going in the right direction. They've been doing well on offense, doing well at receiver. So I think that's probably the school to watch right now. But yeah, I think Ohio State remains the team to beat. And I think, again, if you don't have the stomach to handle this one all the way to December, check back in December, because if you follow this day to day, you may drive yourself a little nuts, but still like where the Buckeyes are at. Let's move to another 5-star wide receiver. And this guy's a little more quiet than Jamie, which makes it a little tougher to really get a true read for. But Ohio State continues its pursuit of Dorian Moore, 5-star wide receiver out of Texas, rated by most, I believe, the number 1 receiver in the country. I think he's as high as number 3 overall player in the country. Very special talent. I think just ran like a 10-400 meter over the weekend, which is absolutely flying. So he's obviously a guy Ohio State will never give up on as long as he's listening. And he is listening. And they're going to get an official visit. And he's committed to LSU still. And it's LSU, Texas, and Ohio State right now. Those are the 3 he's focused on. Kevin, Can Ohio State pull this off? Are you taking the field? Are you taking Texas LSU combo over Ohio State? Or do you think Ohio State actually leads despite his LSU commitment?
Where I feel right now is if I'm LSU, I'm definitely concerned just because, we've all seen committed kids who've gone out and taken visits and everything else. Ohio State fans lived all of that through Jeremiah Smith. When you look at Dorian Moore, though, it looks in a lot of ways like he is looking for all the reasons maybe not to go to LSU. And LSU obviously has put together a nice class. Bryce Underwood's in that class, so he knows who his quarterback is. But so does Ohio State with Tavian St. Clair. This is one that has always kind of felt like it's been out of Ohio State's reach. I don't know. I mean, he's not a kid from Louisiana, so there's not like he's from Duncanville, Texas, Dallas suburb. So it's not like he is in Louisiana and it's just going to be hard to get away from there. So, I mean, obviously with him being from the state of Texas, everybody thinks, well, maybe Texas is going to be the team to beat there. And then, of course, you look at Ohio State side of things, and Brian Hartline gets what Brian Hartline wants in terms of receivers generally on the national level. I mean, we still talk about the loss of Jeremiah McClellan. I mean, everybody remembers their first real miss, and that was really, I guess, Hartline's first real miss for whatever that's worth. I'm going to need to see that official happen. I'm going to need to hear the right things coming out of the official before I'm willing to slide him from one column to the other column. I'm not going. If you say, LSU and Texas together versus Ohio State, I mean, yeah, I'm going to take that one because those are that's just much more of the pie right there. I think Ohio State has a very real shot here. But if you put my feet to the fire and said, where does he sign? I'm going to say, as of right now, I'm going to say Texas.
Yeah, I would take the field against Ohio State. I'd also take the field against LSU. I might take the field against Texas too. I might take the field against any one school you want to throw in there at this point. But I tend to agree with you. I don't think he's going to end up at LSU, and I don't know why. It's not like a solid reason for that because on paper, if you look at what LSU's done at receiver recruiting and development over the years, if you look at having Bryce Underwood in the class, on paper, you would think this would be a really tough pool, which is why, but I'm kind of using some reverse psychology here. If everything looks so good on paper, why are we still talking about Texas and Ohio State here? You've got Bryce Underwood in there. You got, Malik Neighbors and Brian Thomas from your first round picks, Jamar Chase, Justin Jefferson. Yet you are still very heavily involved with Ohio State and Texas. So what more could LSU possibly do to keep you solid than what they've got set up right now? So for that reason, I'm kind of taking the reverse psychology route here. And for that reason, I don't think he's going to end up at LSU for some reason. But I'm kind of with you. I need to see the official and kind of what's being said after that. This is one where, and I hate to say this because everyone's going to say, well, then Ohio State won't win, which is absurd. If we've learned anything in the last 6 months, it's absurd to say what I'm going to say you people are going to say to me. But is that I suspect this will be very NIL heavy. And he's the number one receiver in the country. He's blazing speed. He's got some physical attributes you can't teach. And he's got every school in the country trying to get him. And that doesn't mean that Ohio State can't get him. All that means is that it's going to come down to December. The NIL ones always do, no matter where they're committed, if they're committed anywhere. The NIL heavy recruiting processes always come down to December because there's always someone willing to go in late and come out of nowhere at the very end with some absurd offer. So that's why I'm just being a little cautious on this one, just because of all the different dynamics involved in this recruitment. But I mean, it feels like they're trending, right? I mean, they've been talking about Dorian Moore in Ohio State for 6 months now, but 6 months ago it was like, that's funny. That's a pipe dream. Now it's like, well, they're in it. So, moving in the right direction, yes. In a position of strength, I would stop short of that. So that's kind of the latest there. And I would almost argue the same thing with Jamie French. Again, I don't think you count Moore or French in the numbers. You get whatever your number is at receiver, and if those guys won it at the end, you make it work. If those guys don't, even if one of them would commit earlier, don't get in a situation where if your number's 4 and Jamie French commits, that you only take 2 more guys to go with French and Jones, because that's a good way to end up with 3 on signing day. So I wouldn't count them in the numbers. We'll see what Ohio State does on that. So that's kind of the trend here. I would count maybe Davidson if I got Davidson, but I wouldn't count Sanders, Moore, French. I wouldn't be counting these guys in your quota. I really wouldn't.
45-man class is what you're saying.
Yeah, they're icing on the cake.
Must credit Mark Givler. Must credit Mark Givler. 45-man class.
Yeah, or 35-man class the night before signing day, and then 5 guys realize, they're getting Sanders, Moore, and French. Maybe we don't need to go there. So I think it'll work itself out one way or the other. As I always say, do not worry about the numbers. They're not really real until like August. So they'll figure it out. Last one, defensive guy. And he is actually not technically ranked a 5-star, but we're putting him as a 5-star because 2 of the 3 major recruiting services have him among their top 32 prospects, which means if he stays there over the next few months, he will be a 5-star. So we're gonna take a little bit of liberties here, but we're gonna throw Faheem Delane in, a big time safety out of Maryland. We both had him in the class, I believe. I know I did. I think you did as well, Kevin. When we talked about this, like a week and a half ago, and he was back on campus on Saturday. He's going to official again in June. Kevin, how are we feeling about Faheem Delane?
I've not moved off of my belief with him yet. I've felt that Ohio State has been in great position all along, and while Delane has his list of top schools, I've not heard anything. I've not seen anything that has led me to believe that anybody's been able to topple Ohio State from its significant lead that it has with Delane. Now, we can go back to a show that we just posted recently on defensive backs and how many are they going to take, and get once again, what is the count and what do you do there? And is there a way that Ohio State takes 8 DBs, 9 DBs? I mean, how exactly does that work? I don't have answers for all of that. The answer I do have is that Faheem Delane is going to Ohio State, in my opinion, and I just think it's a natural fit, and it's just going to round out just quite the haul out of the state of Maryland. Between what Ohio State has done in Maryland and with its recent commitments out of the state of New Jersey, it's impressive to see Ohio State's reach, going, from coast to coast. And I don't know what it would take for me to take Delane out of Ohio State's class. I mean, it would have to take a real 180, because at this point, it just seems as a matter of when, not if.
Yeah, I think with Faheem, he's more insulated. I guess I'm thinking of the right word I want to use. Insulated from the numbers game, insulated from looking over his shoulder at who else is in the class. Faheem's like the number 1 or number 2 safety in the country, depending on who you talk to. I mean, personally, I think he's the best safety in the country. He's the best safety I've seen in the class so far, nationally. And so I don't think he cares who else is. I don't think he's the one who would get spooked by a number, by 8 defensive backs. I don't think he's going to care, because in his mind, he's number 1 of those 8. And I also don't think he's a guy who would be a casualty of the numbers as far as Ohio State saying, "Oh, sorry, we're full." They will have a spot for Faheem as long as he wants one. So I think he's insulated from that. And I agree. I expect him to be in the class when the dust settles. But again, I think people have gotten a little bit, I don't want to say overexcited, because it's great to be excited about this stuff, but I think people have gotten a little antsy about it. Like, why isn't this happening? This wasn't supposed to happen yet. Just because the crystal balls go in does not mean a decision is imminent. It just means those people at that point in time think he's going to Ohio State. I think all the crystal balls came in and everyone's like, "Oh, something's going down." I'm like, no, it's not. He's going to take officials. He's a national prospect. why on earth would he commit in February and then just not visit anywhere? Not going to happen, was never going to happen. So I think, again, June, July is your earliest for Faheem, I would think. I think it probably does get done before his senior season, but we'll see. I mean, he could certainly take it into the fall. No one's going to run out of room for Faheem Delane. So, but again, I love where Ohio State stands. We'll take this opportunity to kind of give give props or a pat on the back to Matt Guerrieri, because this one could have went sideways a little bit when Perry Eliano left. And I talked to Faheem like right afterwards, right after they made the hire. And he was like, oh no, I talk to him every day. So Matt Guerrieri's been on this. That's probably I think it was the first recruiting phone call he made, was Faheem Delane. So he has been on top of this. He has done a great job. I don't say salvaging it, but did a great job keeping momentum going, I guess is the best way to put it, when Perry Eliano was not retained. So you've got Guerrieri doing this great job. You've got the relationship with Tim Walton. Ryan Day gets involved with these types of guys. There's really not much of a reason to think that he's not going to end up at Ohio State at this point. So all signs are pointing to Columbus there. So we'll see. Buckeyes, again, 5-star prospects. A lot of them looking closely at Ohio State. Already a top 2 recruiting class with some big fish still out there. So going to be a fun few months. If you're not a member of BuckeyeHuddle.com, it's be a great time to sign up, because we are going to have all of our recruiting coverage. We're going to have our Southern Swing where we go through the South and talk to all of the Ohio State top targets from the South. As I mentioned on other podcasts, this will be our biggest Southern Swing ever. It's the most talented list I've ever put together, and it covers at least 2 new states that we've never stopped for Southern Swing. So going to be all sorts of interesting. So now if you sign up now, you'll get that in your first month. So that's a great time to sign up. You also get the spring game and all the great coverage you're getting from Tom Moore, Tony Girdman, and Kevin on the team. And camps, Elite 11 coming up, Ohio Under Armour camp coming up, NFL draft coming up. There's a lot of stuff coming up on the calendar here in April. So lots of stuff we'll be talking about and reporting on. So Kevin, any parting thoughts here?
No, I mean, we talked about a lot of 5-star kids, and you look at what Ohio State already has in its class with Devin Sanchez and Naeem Offord and some of these other guys. And, we're looking again at a class that will be highly ranked at the end of the cycle. Will it be enough to get Ohio State its first ever recruiting national championship? I don't know. I don't know where you pick up the banner or the trophy for that, but it's going to be a good class, and it's going to be, this is probably one of the more pivotal classes in Ohio State football recruiting history, just based on where I see the amount of talent leaving the program after this 24 season. And that's not saying that Ohio State's going to have to rely upon 8 or 9 true freshmen, but all of this depth you have is going to end up having to be pushed to the front of the line, and you're going to need to sit there and replenish quickly. And I think that Ohio State's 25 class, especially if Ohio State gets 3 of 5, 4 of 5, dare I say 5 of 5 of these names that we've talked about, and just better buckle up and be ready, because this is not, recruiting a guy from across the street. These are real national recruitments, and they're going to be twists and turns and everything else.
Yep. So be sure to follow those twists and turns at BuckeyeHuddle.com. We have a really cool episode coming. We're going to drop another. I know we've a lot this week with the commitments and everything, but we're going to drop another episode. I'm not going to let anyone steal what we're going to talk about, so we're going to keep it quiet. But we are going to drop a very interesting episode here of the Skull Session Recruiting Podcast in the next 24 to 36 hours, let's call it, that I think everyone's going to be very fascinated by. So look for another episode here coming soon. If you're not subscribed to the YouTube channel at youtube.com/BuckeyeHuddle, please subscribe. Hit the like button. Helps other Buckeye fans find us. And if you're listening, please do the same. Subscribe and leave a 5-star rating to help other Ohio State fans find us on Spotify or iTunes, whatever you guys use for that. But appreciate everyone watching and listening, and we will talk to you again soon.